Hello, everybody. This is Brian Tonsoni with Delphi Bracketology, a part of Student Union Sports Group podcast organization, and I'm here with Senior Jesse Scowden, and we're going to talk some recent movement on the NCAA bubble. We're just a few days away, a week and a half away from the bracket actually being revealed, and we have some interesting things happening every night. Jesse, let's talk about the number one seed line. We've had North Carolina, Gonzaga lose, and there's been a lot of talk if Gonzaga can stay on the number one seed line. What are your thoughts about Gonzaga?
I believe they will win out, and then they will get the number one seed. Louisville buffed and lost to Wake Forest last night. That was I wouldn't say bad loss, but it was a bad loss to if they wanted to continue to try to get the number one seed.
What team do you think might jump up and replace either North Carolina or Gonzaga on that number one seed line from either our two or seed lines, three
I'd,
seed lines?
I'd have to go with either Baylor or Oregon, but Baylor's been buffing as well. They have a quality win over Kansas. That's pretty good with a nine strength of schedule. Um, a lot of people don't agree with me, but I think Butler could push it. I doubt they get it though with that sub 200 loss.
Yeah, and that sub 200 loss to Indiana State's really going to be an issue. I think with the committee, it might keep them one seed lower than what the numbers would suggest. So we've kind of moved Butler up to a number two recently because they have. I think this isn't our screen isn't as recent, but with 10 wins in the top 50 and and two wins over Villanova, who is pushing for the number one overall seed, and I think that quality shows, or we have Butler as a top three, possible two candidate. And the question with Gonzaga, North Carolina, is who do you replace them with? It's a comparative tool there. And right now, I think Kansas and Villanova are locked in. I think North Carolina and Gonzaga are holding on to those things. I'm not sure unless Gonzaga loses in the tournament, I'm not sure the tournament's going to do any changes in that area. Some questions on the 3 and 4 seed line. We talked Butler right now. We have them as the top number 3 seed. We've discussed them being a 2 seed. Where is Kentucky? We've moved Kentucky up a little bit based on the fact that they have 7 wins against the top 50 now. So, some interesting teams. The committee revealed their first 16. I think there's just been some movement inside of there. I'm not sure that those 16 teams have actually changed. Your thoughts on 2 through 4 seeds?
Yeah, we've had big discussions on what the teams that the committee revealed if they've lost a lot. Example, Florida State, I believe they've dropped 3 or 4 since the reveal. That's not helping your chances. I like a team like Purdue that you could say they got ripped. A lot of people, or some people, said they should have been top 16, and they just continued to win. They've only lost to Michigan, which is not a horrible loss. Then you got a team like UCLA. Their resume is quite interesting. Their strength of schedule is really bad, and you just got to take in the fact that if the teams keep winning, then you got to keep them up or even move them up farther.
Right, and Oregon's one for us too. That we got to keep Oregon in that 2 seed. They're undefeated since the reveal on February 11th. So let's talk a little bit about locks. I think we tweeted out last night that we have about 10 spots that are questionable in the at-large berth, and we have about 24 teams that are eligible. But one team that we believe is locked, and you have to be careful in that because all kinds of crazy things can happen. But we think the Northwestern Wildcats will make that dance for the first time in their history with an incredible win last night. So talk about the Northwestern Wildcats.
I believe they're a lock. We've been considering almost 14 team loss or teams that have 14 losses. So I think they're safely in, maybe 8, 9, 10 range. If they could run the table in the Big Ten, they can help their seed even more. I don't know if too much more because the Big Ten's down this year, but with a win over Purdue, I could see them jumping a couple spots.
Yeah, and the win over Purdue would be a top 50 win, and getting a top 50 win late can help seeding, and that's where the conference tournaments this week and next week might help out a little bit in getting another top 50 win. And you're looking at moving a seed line or 2 maximum here the rest of the way out. I think most of our seeds are somewhat set, meaning an 8 seed for us now might go up to 7, might go up to 9, a 2 or 3 game losing streak, and other teams may jump up. But things are starting to solidify a little bit. The tough thing for us is going to be picking those final sets of teams that'll get in. But that's what March Madness is. On the first day of March, a full length, toss in a tie game, and Pardon catches it, goes up, shoots a left-handed shot on the right side, and hits the game winner. So excellent start to the month of March for Northwestern, and they're in the tournament. And so that's the kind of things you need to look for. Let's talk about a couple teams that made a big splash last night, aren't in our bracket, but really made us look at them, and that is Wake Forest and Illinois. So talk about why we're considering them. Not yet in the bubble, not yet in, but
Yeah, Wake Forest, amazing win over Louisville last night. Looking at their schedule or their resume or body of work, 8-9 in the ACC, that doesn't really factor in, but 2-9 versus the top 50. I mean, no bad losses. I mean, I think I'd have them in over some teams that are pushing 14, 13 losses.
yeah, and the resume stuff is really questionable this year with the number of losses that some of these teams are racking up. But we discussed last night in a brief meeting with our group that we're going to look at teams with 13 and 14 losses because they have top wins. They have 5 or 6 top 50 wins, and we think that's going to be the deciding factor. And so Illinois, we moved in last night, and that's just hard for me to believe that Illinois is in the tournament with some of the games that they've played on the road. But they have 5 top 50 wins, and I think you have to look at that. Wake Forest has no bad losses, and now they have a couple of wins, just like USC, just like a Rhode Island teams that we have in. They're starting to match that, and so that's how teams move off the bubble and into the tournament, is getting some wins, and some wins at the right time. And Illinois beats Michigan State, gets a top 50 win. They go on the road to Rutgers, a team that they should win, but if they lose at Rutgers, it's over, right?
Yeah.
We had a matchup last night. Kansas State and TCU, and talk about how we might think that's an elimination game. Both teams were sitting at 17 and 12. How might that be looked at as a elimination game?
Well, you have to look at the body of work. They were both pushing for a bubble spot, and I'm not sure who won that. I didn't really look at it, but Kansas State with a couple questionable losses to Oklahoma, that could really affect their chances. But they did actually beat TCU last night. But you have to remember. They could still get a loss and then another tournament loss in their conference if they lose that. That's pushing 14, 15 losses. And our committee last night, we talked, and we thought if you have 15 losses, you shouldn't be in the tournament, let alone 14.
Yeah, at some point we got to draw the line, right? At some point your resume has to be worthy of an NCAA berth. And there are some teams that might not have the resume that are smaller conferences. And I think we just have to find a way as a committee going forward, not us, Delphi Bracketology, but the NCAA committee going forward to having some limit. And I don't think that takes away from what we do if you have some sort of criteria to get into the tournament. Let's talk about that. We talked about that yesterday when we were getting filmed here. Is there some criteria that you think the committee should add next year, that minimum wins, maximum wins, or the number of losses to just make an automatic qualifier, kind of like the bowl games have? You must win 6 games to get in. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you should, if you're honestly going to compete for an NCAA tournament spot, I think you shouldn't have more than 11, 12 losses. I think anything up above that shouldn't be allowed. Also, I know people don't agree with this, but I think if you have a losing conference record, I don't think you should have any part of being in the big dance.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that in the conference. And, there's probably some issues where you're in a tough conference like the ACC and you go 8 and 10, and you played some really good non-conference teams and won. And so that automatic bottom there might be a little tough, but you could do something like you have to have 20 wins. You have to be at least 6 or 7 games over 500. So, 20 and 14 we can still consider, or a 20 and 13 we can still consider, some combination of those types of things, because we're looking at these teams at the bottom of the bracket, and it is just difficult because they have some wins, but boy, they have a lot of losses in that. So let's look at some of our teams that we think are locked in, and we might comment on them. If you look at our seed list, you'll see them seeded 1 through 68. We basically think teams 1 through 36 are in, And we even think some seeds on our 10 line are pretty safe. A Providence, a Seton Hall seem relatively safe, but they better keep winning. Let's talk Xavier. Lost 6 in a row. What do you think they have to do?
They've been very skid lately. Good thing the committee doesn't take into effect the last 10, or at least we think they don't. They just need to win. 18, I think the 18 and 11 or 12.
18-12 now after last night.
I mean, they were ranked pretty high at the beginning of the year. I think it mainly has to do. Didn't they have an injury or some?
Yeah, their
condition?
point guard Sumner got hurt, and I don't know that they've won a game, maybe one game without him. And so again, will the committee look at that since the injury? What kind of team are they? That could be a bracket Sunday surprise right there. Is if they lose their last home game or their last game, if they lose early in the Big East tournament, they're sitting at 18 and 14. They've lost 6 or 7 in a row without their point guard. That might be a place where the committee says we'll go and add someone else. I think the issue for Xavier is the weak bubble, and there's some talk about every year's a weak bubble, and that is true to some extent. But I just think there's some teams at the bottom of this one that are a lot tougher. So Xavier, they play at DePaul, so that's a team they should win. If they lose that, I think we have to question whether or not they're going to remain in. So starting with Xavier, we have Providence and Seton Hall, 3 Big East teams. Wichita State. Talk about, again, we bring this up almost every week. Should they be in or should they not be in if they don't win their conference?
I think they got to win their conference tournament. I remember yesterday we had a big discussion on them. They were like 24-0 versus the top 100 plus, 1-4 versus the top 50. And their top win was Illinois State, I believe. I just have a hard time putting a team like that in when you don't play quality opponents.
And I agree with you, Jesse. The problem is, you're in the conference that you're in. And they're beating these teams by wide margins. And if you just watch them, you think they're a good team and they might be good to see in a tournament. But if the NCAA is going to use criteria to make a decision on any seed line, they should keep their criteria on selecting teams. If we don't like the criteria, change the criteria. But if top wins and who you play and where you win count, it should count for Wichita State as well. I personally, as a fan, I'd like to see Wichita State in if they don't win the Missouri Valley because I think it's good basketball. I think the Missouri Valley, I think some of these small conferences are very, very good basketball. And so I think that makes some interesting March Madness games when you have Middle Tennessee had a great season if they don't win their conference tournament. And the thing that's unfair about conference tournaments is you got to play 3 games in 3 days. That kind of eliminates your advantage. As a top team. So Daniel and I talked some preview of this week, and the college tournaments are going on right now. We got to watch for upsets. If a team we don't have in the bracket wins, especially in the bigger brackets, happens. Let's talk a little bit about Rhode Island as a team that I don't quite understand. Their resume to me is not extremely strong. They had a really good win here recently to put them back into our bracket. They're part of the A10 conference, and let's see, they have 2 top 50 wins, 4 top 100 wins. So they're in right now because I think they beat Virginia Commonwealth. Virginia Commonwealth loses to Dayton. So what do you think of Rhode Island's chances of getting in?
With the bubble being so weak, I could see them definitely getting in. Questionable losses, 2 sub-100 losses. Might hold them accountable, but beating VCU, and I believe did they beat Dayton? No, they didn't beat Dayton. But beating VCU on this week of a bubble, I could see them possibly getting in.
Yeah, and right now we're searching for those teams that have some good wins. You have to have some good wins. So our last 4 in are USC, Syracuse, Illinois, Wake Forest, and our first 4 out right now is Kansas State, California, Illinois State, and Georgia Tech. That can all change tonight with some of the results. One thing you're looking forward to here in the next couple days, one thing that you think our listeners need to look out for bracket purposes?
I think you got to pay attention to the number 1 and 2 seed lines. Kansas and Villanova, I could see being a lock. I really love Butler. Who's your fan? I like the in-school states. I love their resume, and I think they can push for a 1 seed line. Obviously, that 200 plus sub loss is gonna probably hinder their chances. But I just love watching them play. Chris Holtman, big fan.
I will tell fans of teams, if your team has a chance to get a top 50 win, a top 50 road win, now's the time to do it. That'll help in the seeding purposes. I think Purdue's had a nice season. They win the Big Ten, and they might be a 5 seed. If they can win on the road at Northwestern, run the table in the Big Ten, and a top 4 seed falters, they might be able to sneak into that top protected seed. So you're looking at that inside the seed lines. You're looking at getting good, solid wins on the bubble. Kansas State and California, you got to take advantage of any opportunity that you have. My name's Brian Tonsoni. That'll do it for this week's show, Bracket Babblings, NCAA Bracket Talk for Senior Jesse Scowden. This is Delphi Bracketology, part of Student Union Sports Group podcast group, StudentUnionSports.com. Sorry about that. We talk every week. We'll have a new podcast out Monday and a couple of them next week as we get closer to the bracket. I hope you enjoy this weekend's games. Please interact with us on Twitter at Delphi Brackets. Check out our work online at delphibracketology.weebly.com and interact with us. Give us your questions. We'll try to answer them as best as we possibly can. Until then, happy basketball watching. Thanks.